Rocking and rolling. All right. This is a little bit about me. I always like to try to at least share a little, try to mix pictures up sometimes. Some people have been on several of these webinars and see some of the same pictures and the same stuff. But just a little background about me. I'll keep this really short, sweet. As I mentioned, I love fostering dogs. I have two of my own. The one in the picture here is my foster fell, Wesley, who's over here beside me. But I've been fostering dogs for a little over a year now. Probably fostered probably close to 20 now in a year's time. It's been crazy. But I love it. It's hard. It's tough. But it's been great at the same time. I played college golf at Furman University. Had a pretty decent senior year, and thankfully built up enough kind of encouragement to go on. I'd always planned on playing professional golf, but that kind of reiterated that that's what I wanted to do, or that's what I was going to do. Went out and earned LPGA status coming straight out of college, and played between LPGA Tour and what's now the Epson Tour for about 7-8 years. And then got into this industry of college recruiting through one of the recruiting companies, realized there was so much more I could do, wanted to do, started Brandon Jackson Golf 2011. As I said, just had 13 years of doing this. I only work with the girls, been that way for almost half of my business now. So again, quick little synopsis for those that are on here that don't know who I am, just so you know a little bit about me. On to the info. These are the three areas we're going to talk most about: email etiquette, phone call protocol, and the impression you can make on visits. All right, let's talk about email etiquette. So this is intro emails, update emails. Some are a little more specific to certain types of emails. Again, intro versus update, versus when you get a little more into talking to coaches. And then even this can even include in some ways text, potentially Instagram communication. I'll touch on that a little bit as well, but mostly going to focus right now on just that email, initial emails, that kind of stuff, those initial kind of update emails. Biggest thing is they do need to be well written and must be by the player herself. Obviously, as I'm sitting here talking to all girls, must be written by you as the player, not the parent. Especially not ever in a parent writing on behalf of the player. I cannot tell you how many times a coach has said that is probably one of their biggest red flags, is to ever have the first email, especially for a high school player. I'm writing on behalf of my daughter, or I wanted to tell you about my daughter, any of that. Or even if you think you can reply back, say well, she's in school and she's busy, so I'm just going to answer back to this coach for her, kind of thing. Even that, always just let her do it. It's just so easy for a coach to figure it out. But definitely don't ever be the parent, hey, I'm reaching out to tell you about my daughter or on behalf of my daughter. It has to be her that's doing it and written by her. The next slide talks a little bit about some of the grammar and that kind of stuff. So I'll talk about where the parents can definitely be helpful, but again, well written by the player. But keep in mind, because it is written by the player, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, yes, the better schools that you are trying to talk to, if you want to go to Ivy League schools and top academic schools, then of course they're going to expect it to be extremely well written and very well done, because you are looking at those types of schools where there is that expectation of things. So there has to be a little reflection of, hey, I'm sitting here saying I'm a very high academic student asking to go to these high academic schools, and then if your email is all over the place, even for the college coach who doesn't have anything to do with admissions, still going to be like, this doesn't quite make sense. But at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, the next slide talks a little more about the grammar, just how to edit in that degree, but it does need to be honest, transparent, and include everything. Because again, if you just, don't tell coaches what they need to know, or you tell them you've got a certain scoring average, or you don't even talk about your golf in the email, and you just tell them about all this other stuff, and they have to go search what they need to, or you try to hide, I did this and this and this, and again, you don't even get around to really telling them that, hey, you got this scoring average, and they waste their time, those are things they get frustrated with. They want to know. And at the end of the day, as hard as it is to accept, they need to know what your scoring average is. That is what they need to know. And in most cases, they need to know what that is relative to. Unfortunately, high school tournaments don't really count. So yeah, if you're basically going to tell them, my scoring average is such and such, if that's mostly high school tournaments, and then your non-high school tournaments are completely different, different scoring average, that's not going to carry a whole lot of weight if you only give them your high school scoring average, and then they go look at your tournaments and see that that's not a reflection. I know when if you're emailing coaches that it doesn't fit, I know it's hard to put it out there, but I said that's where the transparency comes in. You just can't ignore what these coaches need to see, which at the end of the day or the start of the day, it really is what scores are you shooting, and kind of what's that relative to. But the honesty part, transparency, and including what they need, the scores, your academics, those kinds of things. Understanding the process timeline. If it's prior to the June 15th deadline, they can't reply back. So you certainly don't want to say, ask them questions because they can't answer you back. So again, knowing where you are in the process as to whether you should, just let them know, hey, I'm just, want to let you know that I'm, just wanted to update you. I understand you can't reply back. Again, that just shows you're aware of the process, makes it easier for them, versus if it's post after that June 15th deadline, you can indicate something as far as a response or a next step action, to where that they can respond back, or you are allowed to maybe set up a phone call or something like that. So understanding that obviously always helps. And showing interest in engagement. One thing I really push with the girls I work with, that a lot of times we'll start the email out with just themselves and what they did, and not even a simple, hey coach, I hope you're doing well, how are things. Like the first things they go straight into, hey coach, I just played this tournament, I this, I that, I this. You really got to show your interest, and sometimes it's a little harder to do if they're not in season, and maybe you don't know anything about their life and what they got going on. But you need to at least start out with an intro, not an address, I just went blank on the word, but some sort of hey, how are you, how are things, something, to start the email out. Don't just go straight into me, what I did, what it's, about me kind of thing. But the interest, the engagement of things is always a big thing as well too. So now talk a little bit more on the kind of grammar layout side of things. Another thing, so it's a very simple thing, but just from an eyesight readability, try not to make your email just this one big, huge paragraph. Break it up into paragraphs. I know it's a very simple thing, but I know for me, when I get something where it's just one big, huge, like clump of just words, it's very hard to read. So put your email into a few different paragraphs, break it up. It makes it so much easier to read, and a coach can kind of scroll and might see each paragraph, might even have a different topic. So something very simple, but break it up into some paragraphs, make it a little bit easier to read and to follow and to let it flow a little bit. If you've got some links, if you've got some different things, again, you can kind of divide it up. If you need to add some bullets in there, you can do that as well. Check the grammar and spelling errors. Again, this is where parents can come in. It's okay to do some editing. I do this with a lot of my girls who might send me their emails. I do not change, I will highlight things a lot of times because I want the girls to know, hey, like this was wrong, I need to fix it. If it's something really simple, I might, change that one little, add an apostrophe or something like that. But a lot of times I go in and highlight, hey, these are some things that need to be corrected. Again, I want them learning how to fix these things. I want them to fix them themselves. So I'll go in and highlight, maybe make a few suggestions. Hey, I think you should word this a little different. Maybe try something a little more along these lines, or try to maybe, try to reword this sentence and then tell me what it, let me know what you come up with. but checking the grammar and spelling is obviously something that the parents can certainly help with, making sure there's not just major things, but also don't go in and just completely overcorrect it and over edit it to a point where it's just, again, just perfect. Coaches don't expect it to be perfect. But also keep in mind, you as the player, don't write emails as if you're, writing text messages and stuff like that. Emails need to be a little more professional, a little more formal than you just sending a text message that's lowercase and all this kind of stuff. Keep that in mind. Make sure it's addressed to the right coach in the right school. Can't tell you how many times I've been doing this a long time. I can't promise you I have never maybe slipped up and done that. Luckily, you do have this little 30-second undo on a lot of email accounts these days, but make sure before you do it, it's easy to start kind of going through some emails, hit send, but double check. Make sure you do address. Each email needs to be addressed specifically to the coach. Include some things in there about the school. That's a whole different topic about getting specific with the schools and the research that really kind of gets into a little more specifics. And that's actually become even a more complicated piece of the process, is how to make emails specific and stand out or whatnot. But at a minimum, address to the coach, talk some about the school, the program specific, but make sure that you have changed that within each email and that you don't miss changing some of that, and having it addressed to the coach. And then have an email signature. You don't necessarily, if you can create one within your email account that's automatically there, that has your signature, or not, it may not have to have your actual signature, but your name, if you want to have your phone number, email, your Instagram account, if you want that on there, if you've got like your swing coach or something that you want to have on there, or if not, just make sure you add that each time, but make sure you have some contact info at the bottom of each email as well. If you've got a link to your video, if you've got that in your email, that's fine. But if you want to include that in your email signature, again, the links to your social media, any of that could be in there. So if you want to go ahead and create that within your email account, if you've got one you're using specifically for recruiting, especially, go in, create an email signature. That way it's always going to be there. Just, whatever you're comfortable sharing as far as like phone number. Don't put your home address necessarily, but whether it's number, obviously they have your email, but you can still put your email on there. Swing coach contact info if you want to use them as a reference. So, all right, let's switch over and talk a little bit about phone and or video protocol. This first one, it's a little debatable these days about, cold calling coaches. I am not a fan of this personally within my own business. It is what it is. It happens. We all do it. It's not the end of the world by any means. It's just with technology these days, it's so much easier to find ways to try to set up a time to talk to somebody so that they are prepared. They know what you're going to talk about, or they are, maybe they don't know what they're talking about. They're at least in a place like this next part talks about where they're, where it's quiet, where, especially if it's going to be a video chat, they're prepared more than anything. So ideally, yes, with coaches, you want to have tried to set up a time to chat, through trying to get in touch with them via email, or if you do have their number and you can text them, hey coach, would love to chat with you about things. Just wondered if there was a good time. Instagram has definitely become a more acceptable way to try to contact coaches. You obviously want to do more formal initial things through email with your resume and contacting them that way. But it has become a little more acceptable to send messages via Instagram as a follow-up. Hey, coach, just letting you know I did reach out to you through email and sent you my resume. Love following the team here on Instagram, but just wanted to maybe try to contact you this way and at least follow up. You might get, you may get a chance to connect that way. It's become a little more acceptable. Coaches use it as well on their end to contact recruits too. Just know when to kind of draw the line to not bug them. If you see that they've seen it and you don't get any kind of response, don't just keep trying to bug, be respectful. But you can maybe just to know that your email is not just going into the mix. But again, I get people get frustrated and they're like, they're not responding to my emails, blah, 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 whatever. I just want to try to call them. You certainly can. I mean, it's not, it's still a business practice of, hey, take the initiative, just pick up the phone and call them. So it's not that it's such a negative thing. There is still an idea of this is an initiative. You're willing to do it. So I don't like to put a negative connotation to it. But ideally, you want to try to have a time where that the coach knows you've got a time set, you're doing that. That's the ideal way of having a phone video chat, so that you're prepared, they're prepared, all of those sort of things. You want to be somewhere that it's quiet. If it's a video chat, somewhere that what's going on in the background, all those kinds of things. If it is a video chat, you again be prepared so that you can be somewhere where you are sitting up. Don't be laying on your bed or something like that. Definitely don't be like laying here slouching down and be all like, like this. I don't know if you can actually see my video or not. I never know if my little screen's still up or not. So as I do things, I don't know. But don't be laying and slouching with your hand on your head on your hand or anything. Sit up straight, have good eye contact, just as if you're sitting there in their office with them. We talked just a touch more about this. This is kind of doubles up into the visit side of things, but good eye contact, sit up straight. Try not to fidget too much. I'm kind of bad sometimes on these. I'm very high anxiety kind of person. I fidget a lot. I talk a lot with my hands. I actually try to make sure my camera angle, a lot of times my hands are below it so that if I do anything, you're not going to actually see it. Sometimes I actually like the fact that I talk with my hands. It just kind of shows my like excitement for things. But smile, be enthusiastic. That is another thing I've got. I have some players sometimes that come through to me, and you can only force a player or a person's personality to change so much. Again, sometimes you're gonna find that coach that doesn't care, that that still likes you and fine. But at the end of the day, too, like enthusiasm and smiling is just it's contagious. It makes people want to be around you. It makes conversation be easier when you're giving that kind of feedback back and you're able to sit there and make the other person feel like you want to be on that call with them and that you are enjoying the conversation. And I know it's hard when you're nervous, even if you are happy and you're excited to be doing that call. I know it's hard. So again, the more practice you get, the more you can talk to people that you're a little uncomfortable with, the more you'll be able to do that. And you're not going to be so scared and nervous that kicks in and you can't show your enthusiasm. But being able to smile and be enthusiastic about these calls, having good manners, be polite and gracious. These are the things that go such a long way with these coaches, because they get so many of the good, the bad, the ugly. You'd be surprised at some of the stories that I get. You'd be surprised at some of what I get with players that I talk to with initial calls or, all these things that, I want to play college golf. And, and then I get on a call with them and you couldn't pay me to think that this player wants to play college golf just based on my conversation with them. I mean, there's nothing about this conversation that I'm having with this player that makes me think they actually want to play college golf, because there is nothing about their tone, their ability to talk to me, especially if their parents on the call with them and that kid's not even speaking to me, they're not saying anything. If I had to put money on it, I wouldn't put money on that kid that they want to play. And that's just how a coach is going to feel too. If you can't speak up and talk, and, a coach will write you off really quickly if you don't have some of those qualities about things. So kind of the second half to that is getting into a little more of the actual conversation piece, is having questions to ask the coach. And again, starts to get a little deeper into where I really start working with players too. And sometimes it's hard because you do get put on the spot. Sometimes you get farther into the process and questions become more specific, but you got to have questions, but you also don't just want to ask just, in some ways, yes, you're going to ask just some basic questions no matter what. But then some of the questions you ask start to dictate, what your priorities might be. But you don't necessarily want this to just turn into too much of just a Q&A. you don't want to just have, I mean, it's great. I have a notepad where, I usually have kind of a few things written down that I can kind of reference just in case I get stuck on things. I can kind of look down and be like, oh yeah, this was a topic I wanted to talk about. So of course, if you're going to be on a chat with a coach, you want to have these questions. You want to have some of your answers for things that a coach might ask you, some talking points, but you don't want to make it so much of a, yeah, coach, I've got this question and of course you're going to ask it in a question format, but you really want to learn how to make conversations flow and it not just be, well, how many times do you practice every week? And then you just wait for the coach to answer and they give you an answer and you're like, well, how many times do you work out per week? And the coach answers and that's it. You really want to learn how to make the conversation flow. And, if you ask the question, it's to ask to really get an answer that then might trigger another question about that same topic, or that might trigger you to just ask more questions or inquire more. So you ask the questions to then you're asking to get the answer and listen, not just ask the question to be asking it. So I think that's the biggest thing is I think a lot of people think, well, you're supposed to be asking the coach questions, but they forget that you're actually supposed to be listening to the answer and taking that answer in. Again, you're so nervous. You think, okay, I've got to ask these questions because Brandy told me to ask the coach questions. And you might jot the answer down, but you forget to actually really think about what the coach is telling you and the fact that like, there's probably another question that you could then ask about that topic versus just going right on to the next thing. So if the coach, answers something about practice, you should probably then be able to ask something specifically about that. And then a conversation flows versus you just going straight into the next question. So that's a big thing too, again, that comes with practice, comes with getting more comfortable, comes with being able to think as you're going and not being so nervous. But that's where rapport builds with coaches, where versus the coach getting off a call and being like, okay, that was great. She was prepared. She asked the right questions. She was, all of this, but they just didn't feel anything. And again, that's where you may come out and be, oh, it's great. Like I asked some good questions, and you felt good about the call, but the coach just didn't feel anything. There was just no good mojo feeling on the coach side of things because it was just so formal. And again, that's where you've got to learn to do that and build that rapport with a coach where you can then conversate versus it just being this Q&A kind of thing. So again, the more practice you get, and not just with a coach, but with doing this with other people and learning how to listen as somebody answers questions that you're asking to then create engagement and create more conversation versus just a Q&A. And then also at the same time, you can prepare for the questions a coach is going to ask you. I give my players a list of a handful of questions that a coach may ask. We actually sometimes will do mock interviews to go over them, or they send me what their answers would be. But coaches are going to have their own special questions they want to ask. Sometimes they really want to kind of throw you off and see what you're going to answer. So you've got to be prepared, for anything. And just have some things and be ready to maybe answer some things, from, that you can't be prepared for, I guess. And again, you've got to know those things, know things about the coach, know things about the program that, again, you can have that conversation. And then again, also know things about yourself that maybe aren't just these specific questions that you may think you're going to get asked as well. So some more things there, phone video. And this is going to make this next piece of what we're talking about a little bit shorter, because keep in mind, this phone is phone video. And also this is very much the same for visits as well too. So keep that in mind when I kind of reiterate that here in a minute. So impression on visits. So this is going to be once you're actually there on a visit. This is going to just touch on a little piece of the visit, because so many visits can be different. Some visits are very, full on. You're doing all the tours, you're meeting all of like the people you need to meet. Other visits are a little more, you just have, you might just tour the facilities and you may just meet the coach and that's it. You may only be there for a few hours versus some are the full 48-hour overnight. You can stay the whole time. So I'm not going to go too much into the whole visit, talk a little more just about the interview process piece of the visit. And a few things with it, but big thing. Now you're in person, you're actually meeting that coach. and you may have actually met them at a tournament or something. So either way, that first impression on a visit, the first impression on a coach is really kind of what I'm talking about here. Really good firm handshake. Now, don't try to I've met a few people who have too firm of a handshake. I actually did this assignment with my players. I'll probably do it again with some of them, where I made them, during a week's time, they had to give 5 people a handshake and ask them to give them feedback on, the firmness of the handshake, their eye contact, their kind of facial expression. I think those are the 3 main things. And one or two of them came back, and their feedback was their handshake was a little too firm. So you don't want to just go in and just grab somebody, because that actually can be, even too firm. But you want to do good firm handshake, smile, look them in the eye, good eye contact, and just be confident about it when you meet a coach for the first time. Don't shy away from it. I know this is hard to do. One reason why I love what I get to do, I'm actually writing stuff to share this week. I know it's already Tuesday and I haven't posted anything yet, but about why I started my business, what I love about what I get to do. And a big part of it is because I just absolutely was terrible at all of this stuff. Not just when I was your age, not just when I was in college, but when I was out on tour. I mean, this is why I didn't make it in professional golf. It sounds crazy that this is the stuff, but this is the stuff I struggled with personally, professionally, that I was so anxious about and so bad with. So I love getting to try to instill this in somebody a little bit younger, of how important these things are for your confidence, for not feeling so awkward in these settings, making these impressions, giving yourself these opportunities to do stuff. But be willing to just give those, good handshakes, making that good impression. Then, when you're sitting down in the interview, having that good posture when you're sitting, do not lean back and slouch and lean over. I know if you sit there for a while, if you've been in, the interview for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you might have to lean on the chair a little bit. I get that, but just maintaining good posture. Don't overdo it with the slouching and all of that. Dress appropriately. This has a lot of different cues under it. I hope everybody understands the word appropriately. The main thing is there's different varieties of dressing for what you can dress on a visit, whether you want to go a little more dressy, or you can kind of stick a little more to just kind of golf attire. But mainly what I mean is no short shorts or super short skirts, nothing low cut, nothing like thin spaghetti straps, cropped, cut off jeans, ripped jeans, nothing. Like I said, if you're going to be seated to where you're going to be able to really see, you're, like I said, the shorts being really short, you got to think, especially keeping in mind, what kind of coach are you there with? Some of these coaches are going to be a little more older and old school. Either way, you just always want to think a little more conservatively when it comes to this kind of stuff. You don't have to be overly business casual by any means. This is a golf interview in that sense. But again, the biggest thing is just some of the more revealing kind of things, cutoffs kind of things, super tight, some of those kind of stuff. Again, I don't want to touch on too many subjects and get maybe misinterpreted, but appropriately is just more of how you're going to be seated, and anything being low cut, spaghetti strap, super short, cutoffs, crops, some of those kinds of things. So, and always make sure you limit cell phone use. If you're in there and with the coach, don't use it at all. But even in between times when you're doing stuff that you might feel like, oh, this is a great time to kind of check my phone, really limit cell phone use. No use in the interview process of stuff, that kind of stuff. Don't even have it at all. But anytime you're on a visit and you're in and around the coach and you're doing things where you might be not totally at attention at that point in time, still very aware of that. Last few things. So these first ones, kind of very similar. The questions, be prepared. We've already kind of talked about that. If you are going to go meet with some other people and you know that you've gotten the itinerary, you're going to meet some other people, go in, do some little bit of homework on them, know some things about their bio. If you're going to meet the strength and conditioning coach or, something like that. You never know if this is somewhere you end up committing to, or you never know who knows who. So just take a peek at maybe their bio or something. Maybe know a couple things about the other people that you might be meeting, or, even some of the girls on the team as well. You're just trying to maybe make some connections. Again, those are some big things that you just never know where that might go. Like I said, practice speaking with other people. Just take the time to talk to some people, get more comfortable talking to people that you're not used to talking to. Just take time to greet people, learn how to get more comfortable with those things. I had a girl do a Toastmasters class as a junior in high school that made a big difference. She said she really struggled with some of this, and it really has helped her with her confidence and helped her through the process for sure. A lot of it is about being formal and respectful, but comfortable and relaxed. Because if you're too formal and respectful, then it's really hard to kind of break that shell and get to know you. And you're too, it's just too much of that. And then you really don't kind of crack that shell to be engaging enough. But you also don't want to be too laid back, too relaxed, because then sometimes it comes across as just being like you don't care and you're not serious enough. So find that balance. It's really important. If you do get invited by local coaches that you kind of just think, oh, I'm never going to go there. I don't want to, I'm too good for that, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't want to waste a coach's time, but most of those coaches even understand, even in their mind, sometimes they're like, hey, if we could just get her to visit and maybe she talks good about us, like that to them sometimes means a lot. You just maybe go tell another friend on your high school team, hey, I did go visit and like coach was super nice. Like, no, I'm not going to go there, but like, that to them means a lot. You get some practice in, that coach gets you there to at least say, hey, you visited. Don't always take so much to mean like you're too good for some of these places. Use it as an opportunity. Again, you're not trying to waste the coach's time. You can even kind of tell the coach, hey, coach, I really am hoping to, I don't really want to stay in the area. I'm hoping to go to a bigger school. But yeah, I'd love to come visit. I'd love to learn anything that I can. Haven't been on a visit yet. If you're honest with him or her, like they're probably going to be like, yeah, we'd still love to have you come, especially if you know some other girls that might be interested in the program. Typically it's going to be a mutual thing and you can only be a win-win situation. So keep that in mind for some of that kind of stuff. And don't just totally disregard it and think that, it's just a waste of time. So this is back to my home screen, but if you do happen to want to jot down my contact info, I'll leave it up for just a minute before I stop sharing and go back to my home screen. I'll give just a minute or two. I'm going a few minutes longer. I try to usually keep these 30, 35 minutes and then maybe give us about 5 minutes or so to ask some questions. But let me get back to, I think I quit sharing. Yes. Let me get back to my chat box and see. Oh, I can't find my chat box real fast. I feel like my, there we go. I feel like I got an update on my Zoom. All right, there we go. I'm back now. So I hope this was some great info. If anybody does have a quick question, I'll stay on for just a few minutes. If anybody wants to hop off, I know it's kind of maybe getting a little bit late for some of you. But I'm happy to answer maybe 1 or 2 questions really quick before do call it a night. Okay. What were the red flag questions you received from coaches? Red flag questions. So you mean red flag, like questions that you might, let me see if I'm following. Red flag questions that a player would ask a coach? Hold on. I'm not quite following. What were the red flag questions you received from coaches? So the parents, so yeah, I mean, I'm not told, I know I mentioned parents writing emails on behalf of the players were one of the big red flag, just not questions, but that was a big red flag that I talked about at the beginning. I don't know about the red flag questions that I received from coaches at the beginning. I'm even trying to think of what I was talking about. What about parents attending? So if whoever put that first one in, let's see, hold on. Courtney, if you will kind of explain, I don't know I'm not sure I follow what the red flag questions was, but yeah, I do know I talked about parents writing emails on behalf of the player with a big red flag. Not necessarily a question, but just a big red flag for for coaches was if they ever get emails from a parent who had written on behalf of a player, and especially saying, hey, this is, I'm writing to tell you about my daughter thing. But if you want to type that in, I'll go back. But let me answer these other couples real quick. What about parents attending visits and parents' role on calls with coaches? Yes. So that's a good one. It's great for parents to go on visits. 9 times out of 10, coaches expect parents, or at least one parent, to come on a visit typically. While they want the player to really do most of the process, they also, you're going to get some coaches that are going to be a little bit different, but most of the time they do want to get to know the parents, because they need to know, hey, what am I getting into with a parent once you get here? How much is this parent going to try to be involved or not involved? So they need to get to know the parents a little. So they typically do welcome a parent to be on a visit, and I would always just ask them, because it's not that they have to go. But anytime you get invited on a visit, typically you just want to ask the coach, would you like for my parents to come or not? Sometimes it's a financial thing, if you're flying, traveling or not. Sometimes the coach just expects them to be there. On calls, I always kind of say the first couple of calls, at least the first one, maybe the second one, just you as the player. But once you start getting into either a little more discussion, especially about potential offers or financial questions, or you start to get a little more serious conversations and your parents start to, maybe have a couple of questions, most any coach is going to understand and should be receptive that parents should have some questions. I mean, if a coach is not understanding of that, I see that as a red flag on the coach's side of things typically, because I feel like parents through this process should have the opportunity to ask coaches some questions and find out some things. So, but you want the initial brunt of the conversations to be player and coach, to get to know each other, let the player ask the majority of the questions. And then after 1 or 2 phone calls, maybe you're starting to get into it, you can ask the coach, hey, my parents would love to ask some questions. Or maybe you've had the visit, you plan to visit, and that's when some of those questions come up. But typically you've gotten into a couple of conversations, you're maybe talking a little more seriously, or you're maybe trying to think about potentially moving into a visit or a potential offer or something like that. Totally fine to ask the coach about maybe having a call where your parents could ask some questions. I go through these discussions a lot with the girls I work with, of when that's okay, what questions are okay for parents to ask, those kinds of things. Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about now. So it wasn't that the questions this player asked. Okay, sorry. And just in case this is coming in privately, let me make sure I don't miss anything. So I talked to a coach who said a player had a question that asked some questions that she did not like. It wasn't so much that the questions were that red flag. It was more of that it was just some of the only questions that were asked was the thing. It wasn't that it was a lot of questions. It was just that some of the only questions were just kind of centered around amount of time spent for practice. How much did they work out, I think was the thing. And one other thing, but that was kind of the only questions I think that were asked. And so that was more of the red flag versus the questions that were asked. It wasn't like there was a bunch of questions and there was a lot. It was just the few questions that were asked kind of tended to be a little more around like, well, how much time are we going to spend doing golf and workouts? It was almost like a question of, is she wanting to know, like, do we have to work? How much we're really going to be working, and how much am I going to get to have a social life, was some of the question. And so I don't know if it was just misunderstood or not, basically. So that was more of what it was those couple of questions were about kind of practice time, amount of workouts, I think, and a couple of things like that. So that's what it was. Questions that cause coaches to question players' level of interest, or so yeah, again, that was a little bit, I think he's answering that was a little bit that caused to question maybe the level of interest. And again, those are totally fine questions, just in context of, you definitely can ask the questions of, hey, how much do they work out, what are the workouts like, what's practice like, but maybe not asking like how long is practice, maybe. Again, but if you're asking that in a total concept of like, what's a typical week like, but you're usually going to be asking a bunch of other questions, what do the girls eat? What's the nutrition like? What do you have, like an academic tutor? But I think again, it was just that was sort of the only questions I think that were asked. And there wasn't much else asked. So that was the red flag, not the questions that were asked. Okay. Um, let's see. I got one that's direct to me. So, the one that just I don't know what college I want to go to, no purpose. I don't know what major to go into there. How do you think I should approach that? The young lady, let's see, Kaylee, that you just sent me. I think major to go into. So if you don't have, so this is just, it's kind of a question I think to address to anybody. If you don't, so I have a lot of girls that actually have this, they don't have a big preference. So the question I'm getting is, you don't really have a preference for where I want to go, nor the major that I want to go into either. So, how do I approach that? Because a lot of times too, that doesn't give you much to kind of email coaches about. So, I mean, first of all, absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're not the only one that's in that case. Um, there's a lot of girls that come to me that don't have a major that they want, and they really don't have a preference. They might want to play, yeah, they would love to go play D1 golf, but they don't have to. So that's okay as far as approaching that. I mean, you just start kind of thinking about, some of the locations, start searching some of the degrees and things that might interest you. But again, if you don't have that, that's okay. But start maybe thinking a little bit in terms of locations, size of the school that might fit you a little bit, just starting to do some research, start visiting some campuses. If you want to start reaching out to some coaches, just start within maybe your area. This particular girl that, like I said, this came in as a direct message. She says she's a sophomore, so obviously you can't talk to coaches yet. But following them on Instagram, kind of getting a feel for that. You trying to reach out to any girls that you know who are playing in college, getting to know what their experience has been like. But in terms of reaching out, I mean, it does kind of create, that's one thing that I see some girls struggle with a little bit sometimes, is when you do have this big open, I don't really have any preferences. It is hard to, as while I'm big on when I suggest to people about their list, I suggest a big list just so that you can try to get a big enough list of realistic schools. Sometimes when you don't have preferences, that list is just this massive list. So sometimes you do have to try to create a small enough list in some ways. So just give yourself a couple of parameters, even just starting somewhere, size, location, just say, I'm going to pick these 3 or 4 states and I'm going to try to stay within, 8,000 and 15,000 students or something, and maybe just start there. And the approach, you don't have to say anything about a major that you want. You can just say, as of right now, I'm undecided. And I really just want a great golf experience. So you don't have to be super specific yet. And then just try to kind of match up where your current golf scores are to what's realistic golf wise. So taking into account, hey, if you're currently shooting, high 70s, low 80s, you might look at some lower ranked D1 programs with some D2 programs maybe, and trying to kind of stay realistic golf wise to kind of at least narrow that down to at least give yourself something that's realistic there. But also if you really want to talk a little bit more about that, Kaylee, reach out, shoot me an email. We could maybe set up your initial call and we could talk a little bit more in depth about that. All right. I think I answered, all right, I think I answered everybody's questions. Hopefully I did. I know I got a little confused on that one, but thanks everybody for hopping on. I really appreciate it. And again, I'm gonna keep trying to do some of these, trying to get these scheduled. If anybody has any questions, reach out. Happy to set up your 30-minute call if you want it, or talk more about working with you if you're to a point of needing one-on-one help for any of my programs. I've got it 7th grade all the way up through rising junior or rising seniors who really need help right now. So happy to do that. Just reach out, shoot me a message. Otherwise, everybody have a good night, and I will maybe see you out sometime soon or talk to you soon.